one of the most difficult surahs to memorize in the Quran, Surah Hud. And we are tonight, Bismillah, 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 Bismillah. And we are tonight with Brother Hud, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe I'm not sure if he's gonna speak in English or not, because he's gonna speak about the numbers. This is completely different language. When we talk using the numbers as a language, completely different language. But before explaining all of that words, we need to see how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to deal with the other issue other than the revelation of al-wahy. Or we can ask another question: how would the Quran in itself used to deal with the worldly issues? You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about the money. As He talked about the prayer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us a structure with the dealing, with the investing, with the treasure, with whatever related with the dunya or the money is wise, as He talked about the salah and zakah and siyam and hajj. Okay, how can we control the children? We need your advice. And you are the one who can give our advice. Bismillah. Okay, now this is the time with Brother Hud.
No. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to thank America's Imam Academy for inviting me out and for giving me this opportunity to share with you all about Islamic investing. But before I get started, I just want to remind everyone about our brothers and sisters in Morocco. May Allah have mercy upon them. To please to keep the community, the country, the people in Morocco in your prayers after this devastating earthquake, inshallah. So bismillah. So my name is Hud Williams. Hud Williams. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., by way of Atlanta, Georgia. So 2 years ago, myself and my wife, including my wife and 6 boys, I have 6 sons, so I definitely understand about controlling kids. We moved from Atlanta to Dallas because I'm the regional manager for Amana Mutual Funds, which is the oldest and largest Islamic investment company in the U.S. And before I start with the slides, I usually like to talk about the story about why I think this topic is so important. So if you think back until 1972, so I'm talking about a Muslim woman who took her Shahada in 1972. She decided you can imagine what Islam in America looked like in 1972. You can imagine what that meant or what that looked like for a Muslim woman. She decided to wear a hijab, which kind of ostracized her from her family. And so this woman is being a Muslim for almost 50 years. So in 2022, I sit down with her to talk to her about her retirement. And, you know, she paid off her house. She's getting Social Security. And I said, well, auntie, where is your 401k? Where's your IRA? Where's your 403b? And she says to me this, she said, I never invested in that because I thought it was haram. So here's this Muslim woman who's going into retirement in a very vulnerable state because of she wasn't aware there was a way where you can invest in your future, but do so in a way that's aligned with our faith. The second story I like to open with is a story of when I was fresh out of college. I was around 22, and I went to a presentation about Islamic finance at George Mason University. And so basically, I'm going to give you the summary of the talk. He basically said banking is haram, insurance is haram, financing is haram, investing is haram. And then, I think he was from, Pakistan, so then he left and he got on a flight and he flew back to Pakistan. And it made me really wonder, what about for the folks who are going to live here? No matter where you're coming from, for most of us, America is our home. So how do we make, Islamic finance work for here? And so that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate to tell you more about the work that we do at Amana Mutual Funds and what it means to be an Islamic investment company. So the first thing we always have to disclose is that investing requires risk. That's one of the things that makes investing permissible, is that you're partnering with other people into business, and so that it can incur a loss. So you can't have a loss of your capital. So the first thing I want to talk about is investing for college. So we all know that the cost of college is going up, that over the last 30 years, the cost has gone up from $21,000 to double to almost $40,000. In that same time period, now that a college student is going to graduate with almost $30,000 worth of debt. So you imagine coming into your professionalism, you're 25, you're 21, you finish school, and now you have to carry $30,000 of debt with you. So one of the things we like to talk about is how can you offset that? And so if you save in an ESA, which is an educational savings account, and we have some pamphlets out here, if you start saving when your child is born and you replace a fancy cup of coffee, that fancy cup of coffee is $5 from Starbucks or another place. So if you do that $5 a day, $25 a week, $100 a month, or let's just say $83 a month, because we want to do $1,000 a year. So if you would invest for your child $1,000 a year from age when they're born to 18 at a 7% rate of return, right? At a 7% rate of return, you'll have over $34,000 when the child is 18, right? That $34,000 can go directly to help offsetting that $30,000 of debt that most of our children are graduating with. And so when you talk about investing for college, one of the tools there is called an educational savings account. So in this account, you're allowed to put up $2,000 per year per child. You can't put in more, you can put in less, but up to $2,000. So you can put in up until the child is 18, and then you have until the age of 30 to use it. And if you don't use it, you can actually transfer it over to another child or to another family member. And because the ESA is self-managed, you are allowed to have wide open options of investment, including Islamic investment mutual funds that we offer. So the minimum to start this plan is only $100. It takes probably around 15 to 20 minutes to do completely online. We have a few brochures about our ESA program as well. One of the downsides about the ESA is that if you make over $190,000 a year filing jointly between husband and wife, then you're not able to put in money into an ESA. If that's the case, the other option is called a UGMA, or Uniform Gift to Minors account. So this account allows each person to put in $16,000 per year per child. So I could put in $16,000, my wife could put in $16,000, my parents could put in $16,000. So it allows you to build up a lot of money. These become the property of the child at the age of majority, which in Texas is around 21. And so the UGMA is very flexible. You could put the money in today, you could take it out tomorrow, you could use it for education, you could use it for their wedding, you could use it for travel. So it's basically an investment account. The downside about it is that it is a taxable account. Unlike the ESA had tax advantage where you're not going to be charged taxes while you're investing, and then when you use it for education, there won't be any taxes. The UGMA is a taxable account. The second thing I want to talk about is talk about retirement. And so usually folks ask me, well, Brother Hud, what should I be doing? Should I be investing for my retirement or investing for my kids' education? Which is a very good question. You know, both of those are very important. But this is one thing that I tell folks, is that there's different ways where you can pay for college. They can get a scholarship, they can go part-time, they can pay for it themselves, they can get grants. There's no other way to pay for your retirement except what you put in, what you put away for yourself. And additionally, what else better gift is there for our children to make sure that they don't have the financial burden of taking care of us when we're in retirement age? Of course, our children are going to take care of us. They're going to take us to the doctor. They want to make sure we're okay. But if they don't have the simultaneous burden of taking care of us financially, we're actually taking a burden off of them. So when you think about sources of income in retirement, there's personal savings and investment, which we're going to talk about. There's pension plans. And so if you have a pension plan, consider yourself very blessed because they're not being offered that often anymore. There's Social Security, and then there's also employment during retirement. And so the goal is to make employment during retirement optional. The goal is to make it so we don't have to work when we're at the age of retirement. One second. So what do you think is the average Social Security payment in 2022? Anybody want to guess? What'd you say? 25,000? A little less than that. I wish. What is the average Social Security payment in 2022 per month? 3,000? Okay. 800? So the average right now is actually 1831, right? Which is not chump change. Like, I'll take that. We're not going to give it back to Uncle Sam. But what can you buy, what can you rent in Saxe for $1,800 a month? Can you rent a 3-bedroom in a nice neighborhood? No. So we don't want Social Security to be the prompt. And this is the average. Some people make more. Some people make considerably less. So when we talk about personal savings and investment, there's several types on the board. The one, there's 401k plans. Number two, there's individual retirement accounts, what we're going to talk about more in a second. There's mutual funds, there's real estate, there's life insurance. And then there's the ones that are highlighted in orange, what are certificate of deposits, annuities, and bonds. Those three are made up of loans, right? Either you loaning someone and they paying you back interest, so they're impermissible. And so we have two illustrations. And first, this is the illustration of the person on the left who started investing for their retirement at the age of 25. And they only did $1,000 a year. And they stopped when they got to 35. So they did $1,000 a year from 25 to 35, meaning they invested $10,000. The person on the right invested $1,000 a year from the age of 35 to the age of 65. So 30 years. So the person on the right invested more, but later. The person on the left invested only $10,000, but started much earlier. So at the age of 65 in retirement, the person on the left who only invested $10,000 is going to have $112,000, while the person on the right who invested $30,000 is going to have $107,000. This is all based off a 7% return. But this is to show that the earlier you start, the better. So when folks start investing early, you just can't really catch up unless you have to invest more. So when you start early is the best. This second illustration is one of my favorites. So this illustration, if you think about someone who starts their professional career, say they went to undergrad, they graduated, they went to graduate school, now they're 25 years old and they're starting their first job. So this person says, hey, I'm going to invest $250 per paycheck for my retirement. So that's $250 per paycheck, $500 a year, $500 a month, $6,000 a year, right? Which is, is not really easy, but you can do it. Maybe you don't buy a new car, maybe you live at home, but you start investing $6,000 a year for your retirement. With this schedule, at a 7% rate of return, when they're in retirement, they will have $1.3 million. Just with this one investment account. But say that the person at 25 says, hey, I just graduated, I really want to enjoy my money, I want to buy a new car, so on and so forth. So they wait from 25 to 35, and they start this investment schedule at 35. At 65, they'll only have $606,000 in their retirement account. So by just waiting 10 years, they lost $600,000 of unearned investment income. So you can imagine, that's a very expensive decade. That's the opportunity cost of waiting. But say at 35, they have several children, and so they're not able to invest, so they wait to 45. So if you start the same investment strategy, same investment plan at 45, at 65, you'll only have $261,000. So this is to show the awesome power of compounding investment and also to encourage folks to start early. For folks like myself, when I'm 43 years old, and so when I look at this, I get a little sad. I wish I could go back in time and tell my 25-year-old self to start investing. And so just another double click on that slide. So for the person who started at 25 until 65, they would have invested a total of $240,000. That's a lot of money. But they will have over $1 million of income. So $240,000, which actually came out of their pockets, $1 million of growth. And so it's really important to see that we want to start to have our money work for us. And so when we talk about retirement, there's two different retirement accounts. So the first one is called a traditional individual retirement account. And how this works is that you can put up to $6,000 in, $6,500 in. If you're above 50, you can put an extra $1,000 in. You get a tax deduction for the money you put in this year. It grows tax-free, and then when you're in retirement, you'll start paying taxes in that account. The IRA is very simple to administer, and you have a wide variety of investment options. You can open an individual retirement account on our website. It takes 20 minutes, and the minimum to open an account is $100 investment. So another offshoot, only $100. So another offshoot, that is cheap. So the offshoot of the traditional or the alternative is called a Roth individual retirement account. So how the Roth works is that you don't get a tax deduction when you put it in. So you're putting in after-tax dollars, it grows tax-free, and then when you're in retirement, you don't have to pay taxes on it. So the Roth has the same contribution limits as the traditional, $6,500, and if you're over 50, you can add additional $1,000. So another thing about the Roth is that you have some flexibility in the Roth as well, because life often happens. So the contributions that you put in a Roth account, you can take out at any time. And even the profit in a Roth account, after 5 years, you can take it out if you have major medical expenses, if you have to file for bankruptcy. If you're buying a home for the first time, you can take the money out, the profit and the contribution out of the Roth, to pay for education in any one of your immediate family. So it also can be a vehicle to save for education. And then the last one once you're 59 and a half, you can actually start taking money out your Roth without penalty and without taxes. And so in addition to individual retirement accounts, both the traditional and Roth, the other retirement accounts are the employer-sponsored accounts, which range from a 401k, a 403b, a 457, so on and so forth. And so these accounts are great because they allow you to put up to $22,500 in towards your retirement. The downside of many of these plans is that they have very limited investment options. So you might not be able to find a Sharia-compliant investment option. And so we have two kind of options for people who have a 401k. So if you have a 401k, you can ask your employer if they have a brokerage account. If they have a brokerage account in your 401k, then you're able to invest in Sharia-compliant mutual funds, ETFs, stocks, so on and so forth, because you'll be able to buy anything. Number two is if you have a 401k at a previous employer, so say I work for AT&T, I left AT&T, now I work for Verizon, then I can roll my 401k over into an individual retirement account with someone like Amana Mutual Funds. And that's something that we kind of specialize in as well. And so now I want to talk about what does it mean to be an Islamic investment company. And so when you hear that, it's like, okay, what is an Islamic investment company? We're the oldest and largest. We started our first fund in 1986. Now we have 4 Sharia-compliant mutual funds. We have one that looks at growth companies. We have one that looks at companies who are paying a dividend. It's called the Amana Income Fund. We have one that looks at growth companies in the developing world. It's called the Amana Developing World. And then we have a fixed income mutual fund, which is comprised of sukuks, primarily based out of the Middle East. So for folks who are looking for a very conservative investment, the Amana Participation Fund will fit that bill. And so the first thing when you think about having a Sharia-compliant mutual fund is that you have to have an outside company who's going to monitor, review your portfolio, your requirements, so on and so forth. So the company that we have hired is called Armani Advisors. It's based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, as well as the Gulf. And so they review our portfolio on a quarterly basis. And on an annual basis, they give us a Sharia certificate that says we're following the guidelines of what our scholars have set up. And so when we look at those guidelines, the first guideline is that we look at the primary business of that company. So the primary business of the company is something that's not aligned with our values, exploitative media, pork, gambling, alcohol. We're not going to invest in those companies, full stop. Number two is we actually look at their financial statement. So we look at their balance sheet and say, hey, how much debt does this company have to the total value of it? Number two, we look at their assets. What is the accounts receivable they have? What percentage of that is their total assets? And number three, we also look at their income. And so the companies from secondary or tertiary sources might have impermissible income. But what the scholars have said is that the percent of impermissible income has to be less than 5% of the total income. And so now I just want to show you just a real life example of our funds. So anytime you're talking about how a fund performance is doing, you have to compare it to something. And so you have to have a benchmark. And so we benchmark 2 of our funds off the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is the largest 500 companies in America. So it gives you a kind of broad view of how it does compared to the S&P. So if you invested $10,000 in a Amana Income Fund in June 2013, so 10 years ago, this past June, it would have been worth $27,278, right? So probably 2.7 times what you invested in. As a benchmark, if you invested that into the S&P 500, it would have been worth 33,535. So the amount of income performance was a little below the S&P 500. But if you invested that $10,000 in the amount of growth fund in June 2013, this past June 2023, it would have been worth $40,716,000. So 4 times what you invested in. So that gives you a real life example of the investing. And so when we look at those returns, the amount of income fund, the average return over the last 10 years, the average annual return over the last 10 years was 10.6, roughly. So 10.6. The benchmark, the S&P 500, was at 12.9. 10.6, 12.9. The amount of growth fund was 15.1%. So you can see that the amount of income fund is here, the S&P was 500, and the amount of growth fund was up here. If we look at the amount of developing world, the 10-year average return was 1.8. Our benchmark for that is the MSCI Emerging Market Index was right at 2.95. So that asset class, developing world mutual funds, didn't really perform that well in the last decade. Our participation fund, which is less than 10 years old, the average return over the last 5 years is 1.9. And we compare that to the FTSE Sukuk Index, which is a Sukuk Index from London, which was around 3%. And so the participation fund, our target is usually around 2 to 3% for that one, because it's supposed to be very conservative. You know, one of the things, you know, this is the last slide, and so when you're investing, we want to make sure that people keep in mind taxes, keep in mind fees. You know, our mutual funds are called no-load mutual funds, so there's no cost for buying and selling. And so that was my presentation. I wanted to keep it pretty short. I'm going to pass around this sign-up sheet. If anybody wants me to contact them for more information, we can have a one-on-one discussion, or I can just help people open an account. So I'm going right here for the sisters, and then I'll pass it to the brothers. We have some few minutes for question and answers as well. Do you have a question, sister? I'm going to start with the sisters to give them a chance first. Do you have any questions? You got a question? Any questions over here? Come on. People have to give me at least 3. Okay, here we go. No, we don't. Yes, ma'am.
If the amount of the money is not enough for one child, and I have 2 over the college, can you guys give me like financial aid to add more money on it? Like if I have my amount is not enough money for college, is there any other help from other, or I just benefit from other my pockets or somewhere?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And so how we help you open the account, we're actually not putting in funds in there. So when you open an account and you invest with us, we're going to take that investment and invest it for your future, so hopefully it will grow. So we're not going to be able to put any additional funds in there. But as you can see, if you the amount of income fund has a 10% return. So you're going to make a 10% return on your investment, on the money that you put in for your son. And so when you, if I have six boys, and so I might not be able to put in $2,000 for each boy, so I might just put in, $300 for each one, or might just do $25 a month for each one. Some of one is 21, so I can't put in money for him. So you just put in whatever you can, and no matter how much you put in, you always get the same kind of investment returns. The 401k withdrawing penalties. Yeah, very good. So she was talking about 401k withdrawing penalties and transferring. So there's no fee or charge for rolling over your 401k to an individual retirement account. So you can do that. You can do that, and you can also transfer an individual retirement account from one company to another company. And so you can do all of that free. There's no penalties, no tax consequences. If you withdraw money from a 401k, so a 401k is similar to an individual retirement account where you're putting in pre-tax dollars. So these dollars have never been taxed. So when you withdraw money from your 401k, you're definitely going to be taxed on it first. And then if you draw it without a significant reason, if you're just withdrawing from it because you want to do something else with it, then there's often a penalty. I think the penalty is 10%. So the other option, you can take a loan from your 401k and there's no penalty for that. So if you take a loan from your 401k, it's better than withdrawing from your 401k. But the loan you'll have to pay back. And the scholar said, since you're paying back yourself, so that's permissible. Good question. You had a question here? Mm-hmm. So this is the average over the last 10 years. So I quote this because it gives you the longest kind of track record. This is the average over the last 3 years, averages over the last 5 years. So in 2022, across the industry, in 2022, the S&P 500 was down almost 18%. The amount of growth fund was down 19% in 2022. And the amount of income fund was only down 8%. So last year was a tough year across the board. But you can see, so this year has been pretty good because last year was kind of pretty bad, so it's kind of catching up.
So your investments, are like a target-based investment or are they dividend-based investments?
So we're as a mutual fund, we're always thinking long term. So we're always thinking value investing. But for our 4 different mutual funds, the amount of income fund, we're looking for companies who are paying a dividend and growing a dividend. So these companies usually are a bit more stable. For amount of growth fund, we're looking for companies who are trying to target for more growth. So these companies are taking their profit and reinvesting. But for all these, and so if you have a retirement account, you have your choice about which one of these do you invest in. You can invest in 1, 2, 3, or 4. You can invest in all of them at different percentages. So usually it's about how much risk do you want to take on. This is the fund with the most risk, then this, then this, then this, so on and so forth. Yeah, so when you're comparing the fund, so you have your account type, the individual retirement account, the educational savings account. We have regular investment accounts, right? So those are the account types. And then in the account types, you're going to pick a fund. So you're going to compare a fund to the S&P 500, to a Vanguard fund, to a Fidelity fund, so on and so forth. You don't compare the accounts, you're going to compare the fund, right? Because after you open an account, you have to pick a fund to invest in. And so we have 4, and you can invest in 1, 2, 3, or all 4. Mm-hmm. You can pass this around. Just people. Oh, so a very good question. He said, can you select this if you have an account at Voya or Fidelity? Yes, if you have an account at Voya or Fidelity or Charles Schwab, and if you put in AMANX, you can select our funds through those platforms as well. So you can open an account with us directly, or you can buy our funds through these platforms.
What is the difference? We can go to Fidelity and invest. Why should we open a account?
Oh, so that's a great question. And I will tell you, there's no difference. And so if you want to open an account at Fidelity and buy our funds, or you want to open an account with us and buy our funds, you know, who's going to give you the best customer experience? It's the same fund. It's the same fund you can buy at Fidelity. It's the same fund you can buy with us. And so when you look at these two funds, we have the investor shares and we have the institutional shares. In any tax advantaged account, the IRA, the ESA, the HSA, you're automatically going to get the institutional shares, which has a lower expense ratio. And when you open an account with us and a taxable account with us, you get the investor shares that have a higher expense ratio. The difference between those two funds is what's called a 12B1 fees, with our marketing fees. And so if you open an account with Fidelity, we have to give Fidelity those marketing fees. If you open an account with us, we use those fees to sponsor events in the community, masha events, fundraising dinners, iftars during Ramadan, so on and so forth. So, but whatever works best for you, you know, we want to honor that. Yeah. How do you earn the money? So the question is like, how do you earn the money? And so when you open an account with us, a mutual fund is an investment in practically 30 or 40 different companies. So we're buying companies like Microsoft. So if Microsoft does well, they'll do two things. One is they'll give you a dividend. They'll pay some of their profits back to their shareholders through dividends, right? And that goes to buying you more mutual fund shares. The two things is Microsoft also goes up in value. They come out with a new phone or new tablet, and the Microsoft shares will go up. And so when you sell, you bought it for $65, now it's worth $75. So those are the ways where you're earning money, because you're buying real companies, and those companies are giving you their income, and they're also going up in value. You had a question? So if you want to invest in your 401k, then that's when you see if they have a brokerage option. If they have a brokerage option in your 401k, you can go and select amount of mutual funds, right? And if you have a question about that, just make sure you take my card, you send me an email. There's a way I can look up if your company has a brokerage account. And if they don't have one, if you invest for your retirement, and once you leave there, you can roll it over into an individual retirement account, and we can help you with that.
One more thing, I cannot see more options here. Like if I open this account, if I open Fidelity, I can see one office, other options.
Definitely. And look, the reality is that we have competitors now, alhamdulillah. We have more people who are coming in the industry in terms of Islamic investment alternatives. One of the things is that you can have a brokerage account with us. So for example, say you open an account and you invest in a money income fund, and then you also want to buy another mutual fund, or you just want to buy a single stock. You can open a brokerage account as a part of your IRA and kind of invest in different options.
What about in the HSA? If I bought the HSA account, is there available?
Yes, so two options. You can roll your HSA over to us after you leave. We have an HSA product as well. Or if you're Fidelity, whoever is managing your HSA, if they allow you to invest it and they allow you to have a brokerage account, you can buy our funds too in that account.
I have two questions. What is the youngest age you can start investing?
That's a very good question. What is the youngest age? So you can open a custodial account, a UGMA account with your parents, even at the age of 1, right? So you, along with your parents. And so even for me, I have an account with my sons, And because I want them to understand investing, you know, every quarter or twice a year when we're looking at the statement, I say, Yahya, come and look at the statement. And he says, hey, Daddy, why does it lose money? I'm mad. You know, or we can get a chance to have a conversation about investing.
What age do you get retired?
Do you retire? So the retirement age moved from 65 to around 67, but the early retirement age is around 59 and a half. So at 59 and a half, you can start receiving some of your retirement benefits. No problem. You're going to start investing early? You're going to start investing early? Inshallah.
But you want to know what is the difference between this and like Fidelity or any other company? Why is this called halal? Is this called haram?
Oh, that's very good. And so when you think about the difference, the question is, what's the difference between Fidelity and us? So Fidelity is a company that, you know, is one of the largest kind of investment companies in the world. So Fidelity has a broad array of different mutual funds. So what we're trying to say, is Sharia compliant is the actual mutual fund, not Fidelity. So Fidelity, you can buy our mutual funds through Fidelity. You can buy some of our competitors' Islamic mutual funds or Islamic ETFs through Fidelity. So Fidelity is not the issue, it's just the mutual fund that you're buying. So for example, if you open an account with Fidelity and you buy the S&P 500, right? Every Fidelity Vanguard, they're all going to have an S&P 500 or an ETF that performs like the S&P 500. But when you buy the S&P 500, you're owning companies, you're owning alcohol companies, you're owning gambling companies, you're owning companies that make money off exploitative media, you're owning companies that make weapons of mass destruction. Our mutual fund is filtering out all of that. So we filter out companies that sell alcohol, we filter out companies that are gambling or casino companies, so on and so forth. So the fund you're going to be investing in is aligned with our values as Muslims. Any questions from the sisters? Okay, inshallah. Okay, well, I'll still be around here to after Isha, but I think now is the perfect time to conclude. So thank you very much for allowing me to give this presentation. If you leave your name and telephone number, I'll send you an email and we can set up a time to talk about your unique investment needs. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.